Mic test, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Testing, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Nothing. Mic check, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Mic check, 1, 2.
Good morning. My name is Kimberly Eds. I'm the Public Information Officer for the Orange County District Attorney's Office. Just a few points of clarification. We're going to introduce the speakers. The victims are going to be telling their stories. We just politely ask that you reserve all questions until the end. And it is now my pleasure to introduce Orange County District Attorney Todd Spitzer.
Wait, come on in. Come on in. Everybody wants to see you. Come on, we're going to fill in right here, please. All the way across. So, good morning. My name is Todd Spitzer. I'm the District Attorney of Orange County, California. And this morning we want to talk to you about the great impact that the governor's decision with respect to the moratorium on the death penalty in California has had on all these good people. And you can see by the fact that they don't even know where to stand is because they don't even know where they stand in California. So I have two prosecutors, Brahim, would you come up, and Pat Dixon. These are two prosecutors in my office. Pat Dixon was a death penalty prosecutor in Los Angeles District Attorney's Office for 37 years. Brahim Beitai is a senior assistant district attorney in Orange County. He has 23 years of prosecutorial experience. Pat Dixon has 4 individuals who are presently sentenced to death on death row, and Brahim Beitai has 7 individuals on death row who were lawfully sentenced to death in the state of California. The 3 of us together have almost 100 years of prosecutorial experience in the state of California. Today I'm announcing that we are launching the Victims of Murder Justice Tour in California. We're going to go into all 80 assembly districts. We're going to go into all 40 Senate districts. Victims are going to tell their stories not just here today in Sacramento, but they're going to tell their story all over the state of California. Because we want to make one point, and one point very, very clearly, that the governor of the state of California, Governor Newsom, maybe I should wait because that's going to be distracting, I think, on your sound. You good? Okay. No, it's no problem. I just don't want you to step on every sound. Okay. So we're all coming together collectively to denounce the decision of Governor Newsom to make a blanket unlawful order that the death penalty in California is in a moratorium. Governor Newsom took a knife and stabbed it in the heart of all these crime victims standing here today and the thousands of crime victims who received a lawful death sentence in the state of California by a jury. The voters approved the death penalty in 2012 in this state. They reapproved it in 2016. In fact, in 2016, they said they wanted the death penalty actually expedited and streamlined. So I'm making several requests of the governor today, and I will be meeting later on today with the governor's office, and I'm taking a video from the Crime Victims March this week in Orange County to the governor. And this is National Crime Victims Week in the United States of America. It's one of the most important sacred weeks that we observe in the nation and in California, and yet the governor decided he would spend his time out of the state and out of the country advocating for people who he believes are victims when he's got thousands of victims right here in the state of California. So we're asking the governor to immediately meet with these victims. He met with Nina Salarno of Crime Victims United, who's here today, and her mother at Harry Salarno. He met with Mark Klass, whose daughter Polly was brutally murdered. But he needs to meet with the victims who have inmates sentenced on death row. So we're asking for him to actually understand the cases in which he decided to make a blanket moratorium. We want him to commit to what he can lawfully do, which is a clemency review. He can sit down on a case-by-case basis. He can meet with the defense. He can meet with the defendant's lawyers, the defense. He can meet with the victims. He can meet with the prosecutors, and he can look into every single case. That's his power and his right under the California Constitution, but he needs to follow the Constitution. And we're asking, thirdly, that he acknowledge and understand that the death penalty is not indiscriminate. It is reserved for the most horrific, heinous, torturous, and sadistic individuals who have committed murder that is unspeakable. And by doing a blanket moratorium, he basically took away the ability to understand that. And that's not right, it's not fair, it's not just. The other thing I just want to clarify briefly is the morality question. It's the elephant in the room. And I want to make it clear that if we're going to discuss the morality of the death penalty, that question was answered by the voters of the state of California. As a former state legislator, somebody who worked in the building across the street, the state capitol, in 1982, 36 years ago as a Senate fellow, I can tell you when there are difficult questions of law, we often present those to the voters of the state of California. And in this case, we have done that. And they have resolved that issue from that point of view. And they want the death penalty. And if the governor doesn't believe that the voters of the state of California any longer want the death penalty, then he should do what we all do when we present those questions. Go get your signatures, put it on the ballot, and let's have a discussion about it in the public arena. In November of 1986, Rose Bird lost her seat as the Supreme Court Justice on the California Supreme Court by a 67 to 33% vote. And the reason she was recalled as the only Supreme Court Justice in California is because she refused to impose the death penalty, and she was recalled. Justice Mosk, who is a liberal member of the court, made the following observation about why Rose Bird lost her seat. He said, Rose Bird was pilloried because she generally voted to find some defect in the death penalty conviction and to reverse them. I, Justice Mosk speaking, said, I probably don't like the death penalty any more than she does. As a matter of fact, Justice Mosk said, I think the death penalty is wrong. That a person has no right to kill, and the state has no right to kill. But the difference is that I took an oath to support the law as it is and not as I prefer it to be, and therefore I've written my share of opinions upholding capital judgment. Jerry Brown, a former Attorney General and Governor, was opposed to the death penalty. But as Attorney General, he defended the convictions for death penalty, and as Governor, he lifted the moratorium that resulted in a conviction here in California. So today, we're very, very clear. This is not about the morality of the death penalty. The voters have decided that. This is about the governor following the law. Follow the law, do your job, Governor, meet with these victims. At this time, I'd like to call forward Sam and Jacqueline Hare, Steve and Jacqueline Hare, to talk about their son. Why don't you come forward? These are two victims from Orange County cases where the death penalty has been imposed.
Good morning. This picture's, if you can move just a minute, Ron, my son and Julie Kibuishi, who were murdered by Dan Wozniak in May of 2010. Wozniak lured my son over to a place, put 2 bullets into his head, took his money, took his credit card, and used that to get some money. He murdered Julie Kibuishi the same day to make her look as if she had been raped by my son, and he used her as a decoy. And all for paying some bills and having an awesome wedding. Well, the police caught him within a week, and he confessed immediately. By the way, when he murdered my son, he also dismembered him and threw his body parts in a park. That's why we are here. But I want to explain something too. We went through 8.5 years and 320 hearings to finally get justice, which just ended. All the hearings ended just this past November. And he received the death penalty, as deserved. And, you know, after 8.5 years, we figured, okay, legal stuff for us is done. We don't have to go to any more hearings. And it gave us some solace that Wozniak was sentenced to death, and he's on death row. That gave us a lot of solace, actually, because he's where he's supposed to belong. He's where he belongs. All of a sudden, a few weeks ago, I get a call and say, Governor Newsom put a moratorium on the death penalty because of, for whatever reasons, he didn't feel it was right or for whatever. What Governor Newsom doesn't know is he wasn't there when I walked into my son's apartment and found the dead body of Julie Kibuishi, positioned, absolutely defiled. He wasn't there when I went to the mortuary and saw my son sewed up just to be buried in one piece. He wasn't there, and he was missing a hand. They never found that. You want anger? You want resentment? You got it, because that's what I see every day. He never took that into consideration. What Mr. Spitzer said, he just threw a blanket over it. A real leader would say, let me listen to this case by case and make the decision. He reopened all wounds, and he created new ones as well, all for his feelings. That's not right, and that's not justice. I'm going to end it here because there's so much to the story, and I have to keep it brief. But I'd like everybody to listen to this. Dan Wozniak took the lives of Sam Hare and Julie Kibuishi. Governor Newsom took away their justice. And that, Governor, is immoral. Thank you.
No parent should have to stand up here during an event like this and describe how their son's body had to be sewn together in order to get it into a casket for an appropriate burial. That's outrageous. The fact that we're even standing here having to explain these cases in a public arena to overturn an unlawful act by the governor is literally unconscionable. This is very difficult for us. It's abhorrent, quite frankly, for us to even have to go through this exercise to get justice. A person that I'd like to introduce next is Ron Harrington. His brother and sister-in-law were murdered by the Golden State Killer. That is a pending case. It was one of the prosecutors in that case. I'm not at liberty to talk about specifics, but he certainly is a crime victim, and he would like to be heard and has a right under Marcy's law to be heard about the impact that that case has had on his family. Mr. Harrington.
Thank you. The Golden State Killer is the worst of the worst of the worst ever. 13 murders, 50+ rapes. He is the most prolific murder rapist in history. Certain crimes are just so brutal, so heinous. He is the poster child for the death penalty. I had 4 brothers. Oldest brother, Bruce. I was number 2. Next brother, Doug. My youngest brother, Keith. The smartest of all of the brothers. He was finishing medical school early. He had been married 3 months. His wife, a pediatric nurse. August 19th, 1980, the Golden State Killer went into their home, tied them up, raped Patty, bludgeoned them both to death, and then pulverized Patty. My dad found them 2 days later. Emotionally, I thought my dad was the strongest person I had ever known. He was never the same. Governor Newsom, please take the time to look at those photographs. There are certain things in life you don't forget. After the house was cleared by the authorities, the 3 remaining brothers had to take that bed to the dump. Governor Newsom, please explain to the Golden State victims how they should be lenient and compassionate. Governor Newsom, please explain to the rape victims of the Golden State Killer how they should be lenient and compassionate. Governor Newsom, explain to all of those courageous women who stood up and were victims of the Golden State Killer how they should be lenient and compassionate. In 2016, the California voters not only voted to uphold the death penalty, they voted to accelerate the appeals process in the death penalty cases. Before you became governor, you gave many interviews. You gave a 2016 interview with the Modesto Bee. There's an interview on National Public Radio, and I know there are more. In those interviews, you said that you would not interject your personal opinion as it relates to the death penalty, and that you would follow the law in California and uphold the death penalty. Governor, you are now doing exactly what you said you would not do. Some may say the governor is even talking with a forked tongue. I was in the courtroom yesterday. I was 15 feet away from the Golden State Killer, a man who murdered my youngest brother and his wife Patty now 39 years ago. You could feel the evil. We thoroughly support the district attorney's decision to seek the death penalty. Governor, you are wrong. You need to reconsider your position.
Thank you, Mr. Harrington. I think it's very clear from Mr. Harrington's point as a victim of the Golden State Killer that the governor does not own the moral high ground here. The victims own the moral high ground. It's my honor at this time to introduce Anne Marie Schubert, the District Attorney of Sacramento County. She will introduce and we will have speak Sandy Friend. She's the mother of 8-year-old homicide victim Michael Lyons. Phyllis Loya, mother of homicide victim Pittsburgh police officer Larry Lassiter Jr. And she will also introduce, and we will hear from Jerry Oliver and Phyllis Sylvia, mother and sister of homicide victim Sacramento Sheriff's Deputy Danny Oliver. Anne-Marie.
Good morning. Just a little over a year ago, Sacramento Bee reported about a penalty phase case that was happening in Sacramento County. And as it was reported, jurors held back tears as Sacramento County Sheriff's Deputy Danny Oliver's sisters, daughter, wife, and mother testified about the devastating impact his murder had on their family. "He was my baby," said Danny's mom. "He was my youngest son. He was the glue that held my family together." Death row killers have murdered over 1,000 victims across California. 200 plus of those victims are children. Well over 40 are police officers. Hundreds were raped, tortured, and killed. When Governor Newsom made the decision to impose his own personal view, guess how many victims he met with that were victims of death row killers? 1. He gave Mark Klass less than 12 hours notice without any indication of what it was all about. Mark Klass and those thousands of victims have waited oftentimes decades. Yet one person with the stroke of a pen made a decision on imposing his own personal views. To describe how it feels as prosecutors, public safety members, and victims, there's one word that comes to mind, and that is disgraceful. At this time, I'd like to introduce Danny Oliver's mother and sister to tell you the impact of Governor Newsom's decision.
Well, as you probably know, I'm Danny's mom. And I'm here to say, Governor Newsom, you took away from me the satisfaction that I had that Danny's rights had finally been met when that jury brought in a guilty verdict and sentenced that monster to death. And now you turned the knife again in my stomach, in my heart. You've ripped my heart out again. And you've taken the satisfaction of knowing that Danny's rights were finally met. Governor Newsom, you need to meet with me. I dare you to meet with me. And I can give you some facts that you don't want to hear. So at this time, I challenge you, Governor Newsom, come meet with me. I dare you.
As Anne-Marie said, he didn't notify any victims. I heard it on the radio on the way home. Almost got in an accident, started crying, it was like hearing over the phone the day Danny was shot and killed that my brother was killed in the line of duty. And it was that same knife and that same feeling of devastation. We waited 3 years for justice, and 12 jurors gave us that justice and felt like they had done their job, which they did. They listened to the filth that came out of his mouth and the stuff that happened as we did. And Governor Newsom, you shouldn't impose your views on us. I wonder if you had a family member or brother or sister that was killed by somebody, would you not want the death penalty and justice for them? How can you deny that to the families and the victims' families? Thank you.
Now I'd like to introduce Sandy Friend, whose child, Michael, was murdered.
Hi, I'm Sandy Friend, and this is my sister Tina. She's been through this ever since the day Michael went missing. A few weeks ago, I had a press release and we did a little interviewing, and I went to the governor's office as Michael's mom, and I filled out a paper that says, "Why do you want to see the governor?" I stood outside those 2 doors. I filled it out. I turned it in. Up until this day, today, I still have not heard from him. I think that if he was going to reverse the death penalty and take away my justice, that I had a right for him to say that to my face. I mean, his personal views, that's fine. He can have his personal view. But Michael's rights, my 8-year-old child that was brutally murdered, tortured for 10 hours, 70 to 80 inflicted wounds on him. He was raped so severely. I have the right to have him tell me to my face why he took my justice away from my son. And not only from my son, Julie O'Connell. She was kidnapped, raped, tortured in the same manner as Michael, 16 years before Michael. And then after Michael's case, after we got the justice that we seeked so hard, I mean, there's no going back when you get that kind of justice. There's only one way for a governor to take it away, and that is not his right. We are the people. We have voiced our opinions. We have voiced what we want in California. We voted. I don't think he has any, this is really hard and emotional, because you just can't understand how one person's personal views can wipe away hundreds of verdicts for the capital punishment which those individual monsters deserved. For each case, prosecutors, all the way down to the law enforcement that worked those cases for hours and hours. That's the only reason why these individuals are where they're at. You have totally disrespected and disgraced all of us. Julie, she got justice even though 16 years later, they gave him the death penalty for her. This man is a monster. What he did to our children is horrific. A parent's worst nightmare. No one would ever want to even hear the details of Michael's case. It's just so horrific. And I don't think that if he wanted to stand by his decision of taking the death penalty away for the moratorium, then he should have been able to meet with me. There's no reason why he shouldn't have met with me. I did the steps it takes to meet with him, and the utmost disrespectful thing he could have done was not even answer me. I mean, I support the Public Safety Association and fighting the governor to do what the people of the state of California want, and we want to implement the death penalty and put the death penalty on us, put the death penalty back in place where it deserves, where it should be. And we, the victims, we need to have our justice, and he needs to give it back to us and not sit somewhere on vacation in the most important week of the state of California for victims of crime. Thank you.
And now I'd like to introduce Phyllis Loya.
Good morning. I'm the mother of Pittsburgh officer Larry Lassiter, who was killed in the line of duty in 2005. As you've listened to all these other victims speak, it's become apparent to every one of you how these murders have been a life-altering event for victims, the surviving victims. Our lives were changed. The bullets, the stabbings, whatever the method of killing was to the direct victim, they also killed a part of everyone that loved them. I felt betrayed by Governor Newsom. I felt that he was like a thief in the night who stole justice from us. The most precious thing any of us have, there's not one material item that any of us have that we wouldn't give up for justice for our family member. And I also want to talk about the trial process a little bit. To be eligible for the death penalty in California, you have to have been found to have committed a special circumstance. I want to talk a little bit about the trial of my son's killers. The gentleman that was convicted and sentenced to death row did not contest that he had committed two special circumstances in the guilt phase of the trial. He conceded that he had killed my son in the performance of his duty as a police officer. He conceded another special circumstance, that he had committed a murder during the course of a robbery. He only contested a third special circumstance, lying in wait, which he was also found guilty of by the jury. And I say this because I think this is really the norm for most death penalty cases. The fight is not so much at the guilt phase, it's at the penalty phase when they're fighting. Give me life without possibility instead of giving me the death sentence. And I think that's important for the voters to know and for the governor to consider. I will guarantee you the governor has not read the facts of all these cases. I will tell you that I have. I worked on No on 34 in 2012 and Yes on 66 in 2016. I have read every death row case. I know the facts. There are over 238 children that are child victims of death row killers. There are 43 cop killers. And I will tell you, after having read these cases, I don't spend sleepless nights just because of my son's case. I spend sleepless nights because I read about these horrible murders of these other victims. Two that haunt me, I would say 3 or 4 times a week. I wake up thinking about them, are the 2 different cases where women were burned alive in front of their children. One of those cases, when firemen came, 5 little children were trying to put out the flames on their mother with little Dixie cups of water. These are horrible crimes. A judge sentences inmates on death row to death after juries found them guilty. And Governor Newsom, after telling the potential voters before the election that he would follow the law, did the exact opposite. And I'm sorry, I do not believe that that wasn't his game plan all along, that he knew he was going to do this, that he was deliberately lying to the voters, and he needs to take a step back. He needs to speak with the actual victims of death row killers. Let us have a talk. He wants to talk about sleepless night. I have challenged him. You call me at 1 or 2 in the morning, and I'll come up to Sacramento, and we can meet at the Law Enforcement Memorial, and we can have a chat about sleepless nights, because none of us are sleeping. Thank you.
Wow. You know, just across the street from the Capitol is a Peace Officers Memorial. And what this moratorium means is that an average citizen who's murdered their perpetrator wouldn't get the death penalty, but then a person who kills a law enforcement officer in the line of duty wouldn't get the death penalty either. So I also call on all the victims and all the family members and all the police officers in the state of California, let's get organized. What the governor's done is reprehensible. It's my honor to introduce Gregory Totten. He's the District Attorney of Ventura County, and he will also introduce Jeannie List. Greg.
Let me begin by giving you a visual image. Nearly 30 years ago, a little boy named Paul Bailey, was 8 years old, was abducted from a school in the county of Los Angeles. His abductor, who now sits on death row, took him to a remote location where he bound him with handcuffs, put a gag in his mouth, wrapped 5 layers of duct tape around this little boy's head, sodomized him, and then strangled him to death. And if that wasn't enough, after Paul died, he took Paul Bailey to Ventura County, a remote location in Ventura County, dumped his body, and set it on fire. With one fell swoop of a pen, Governor Newsom undid what 12 jurors found was the right punishment for that case, what a Superior Court judge affirmed in decision-making, and what an overwhelming majority of our California Supreme Court concluded was the right decision. Now let me tell you about another case. Randolph Kling was a lifelong criminal, a con artist who had spent most of his adult life in prison. In fact, he had 18 separate felony convictions. During his criminal endeavors, he created and stole more than 100 identities. In August of 2003, a small businessman who ran a metal fabrication company named William Bud Fulosky was murdered. He was executed in Lancaster, California. His dog had been shot too. Just 8 months later, in February of 2004, William's son, Michael Bud Fulosky, was murdered too, after Michael had stepped in to be the executor of his father's estate. An investigation revealed that the killings, that Randolph Kling, had set his sights on the ownership of Bud Fulosky's firm. And he had Mr. Kling had manufactured homemade silencers for firearms. He had researched his victims over the internet, and he had cased every one of their movements before carrying out his plan. Kling murdered the Bud Fuloskys all the while he was seducing William's wife in hopes of gaining control of the business. In May 2009, a jury found Kling guilty of both murders, as well as a special circumstance of lying in wait and multiple murder. Kling was further convicted of animal cruelty and for possessing a silencer. Jeannie List, William's sister, and Michael's aunt watched her family go through the torturous ordeal that's been described by other victims as well, of watching this case proceed and of burying not just one family member killed at the hands of a merciless psychopath, but 2. She attended almost every hearing over the 6-month trial and testified at the penalty phase. And I'd like to invite Jeannie List to come forward and share her experience. Thank you.
Thank you. Like Mr. Totten said, my brother was murdered in August of 2003. He didn't know his assailant. He got up one morning and was doing some chores, and he was shot 11 times between here and here. Sorry. We didn't know right away. We didn't find him for a couple of days. The family decided not to allow my mom to see my brother. They didn't want that to be her last memory. So that day, my mom started shutting down. So it wasn't just my brother. Now my mom, she couldn't think about it. She couldn't imagine what happened to her child. So we didn't know anything at that time. 6 months later, he went after and researched and plotted and murdered my brother's eldest son, Michael. He was shot 6 times while trying to run away from him. When Randy was arrested, he wasn't arrested for the murder, he was arrested for identity fraud. So luckily he was in prison for that, and it gave us time to start researching our case. The 6-month trial, my mom and dad were there every day. They had to listen to the details of him researching our family, researching the business, plotting, making the weapons, the pictures of my brother and my nephew. They sat there every day. We lost my mom. She went down so fast because she couldn't even think. We also lost my brother and his son, Michael, their sister, my niece, Christine. Couldn't deal with it. She had to move away. She moved to Colorado, so we lost her and her family because they could not deal with staying in the same location and seeing the same people. Michael's wife, his widow, had to move away, so we lost her. Bill had 2 more children with his current wife at that time. They were young. They pulled away from the family. We lost them. His daughter, Ashley, was married 2 weeks ago. Not any of us were invited to the wedding because they don't know us. We lost those 2. Mom and Dad would be here if they could, but they passed 2 years ago. So Governor Newsom, what you did by signing that paper, when you signed it, you said, I can't sleep. I could not sleep knowing that it's a possibility that someone was innocent and possibly went to their death. Our system, we have to have faith in our system. I know it's not perfect. I know it's not perfect. But we trusted our system. We trusted the jury. We trusted the legal system. We went through those trials. We went and sat every day. We listened to those jurors. They came up with the conviction. They came up with death. It is what is right. And when you sign that paper, for all of us, you cut open that wound. You are putting us back and listening to those in our head, the trial, those moments, those pictures, everything. It cut open that wound again for all of us. We're reliving it every day because now it's not justice for us. You took that away because you might not be able to sleep, and that's not right. You had no right to do this. Thank you.
So it's abundantly clear now that this is not just about the victims who lost their lives and the perpetrator who's on death row as a result of that. Victimization in these cases is so pervasive and so widespread, it's ruined other people's lives. So a little sleep, a little loss of sleep, when these people who are victims of these crimes and generations of their families to come as a result of this, I don't even think it's an equal conversation. Michael Hestrin is the elected district attorney of Riverside County, and he has a very important case and a call to action that he'd like to share with us. Michael, welcome.
Good morning and thank you. My name is Mike Hestrin. I'm the Riverside County district attorney. I want to talk to you about a case that happened in the fall of 1980. In the fall of 1980, 15-year-old Susan Jordan left her house in a quiet neighborhood in the city of Riverside on her way to school. She was walking past one of our orange groves, and a man named Albert Brown saw her, followed her, attacked her, and dragged her into those orange groves. Once he was in the orange groves, he brutally raped her multiple times. He took a shoelace from one of her shoes, he wrapped it around her neck, and he strangled her to death. And he left her there, naked and exposed. Prior to that day, Albert Brown had been previously convicted of the rape of an 11-year-old girl. For that crime, he got probation in the mid-1970s. In 1976, he broke into someone's house in the middle of the night and raped a 14-year-old girl by force. For that crime, he was convicted and sent to prison. And he got early release and was paroled in 2 years. The day that he attacked Susan, he had been out of prison for 4 months. After he finished brutally raping and killing Susan, he took her ID, her school ID, and he went home. And he called Susan's mother, Angelina Jordan. And she answered her phone. And he said to her, "Mrs. J, Susie's not home yet, is she? Guess what? You're never going to see your little girl again." And then he told her where she could find her daughter's body. And the police went out there and they found her buried, partially buried in dirt and naked from the waist down. During the investigation, the police found Susie's school books at his apartment. They also found the white pages opened with the name of the Jordans circled. They found blood-stained and semen-stained clothing that he saved. This man has been on death row for almost 40 years. I recently reached out to the family. Angelina Jordan is 78 years old. She's waiting for justice. That's 40 years of lost birthdays, Christmases, holidays. 40 years. And what I want to say is that when a parent loses a child to a violent death, they are forever reliving that moment, wondering what the last moments of their child's life was like. And having to know that the last face that Susie saw was the face of this monstrous killer. I'm asking specifically Governor Newsom, and I say this with all the respect to your office, I'm asking you to lift the moratorium on this case. All the appeals have run. Please look at the facts of this case. If you look at the facts of this case, the monstrous, horrific facts, and you believe he deserves leniency and clemency, I will live with that. The family will live with that. But they have suffered, and they deserve to be considered. And they've earned the right to not be ignored. Governor Newsom, I'm asking you to look at the facts of this case and consider the victims and what they've suffered and make the right decision. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Michael. I also want to acknowledge and thank for his presence Jeffrey Reisig, the district attorney. You're very familiar with him in this area, Yolo County, across the river. At this time, I'm going to take questions. If you have any specific questions, yes, ma'am.
So you mentioned that you're going to be doing a tour to all the assembly districts. Beyond that, is there any way, are there any legal avenues that you might try to stop the governor has done, and might there be any ballot measure?
So obviously there's already been 2 ballot measures, and so there are obviously people who are looking at the legal ramifications of this decision and looking at potential arguments with respect to how the governor's moratorium is affected. Personally, I've already stated, but I'll state it again, that obviously we recognize that he has the ability to grant clemency, but as Mr. Hestrin just indicated, and Ms. Schuber has also indicated, and all the other district attorneys up here, there's a legal process by which he's allowed to proceed, which is a clemency hearing on a case-by-case basis, and that the blanket wave the magic wand and grant clemency to all 737 inmates on death row is unlawful. It's also, in my opinion, as the co-author and statewide campaign manager of Marcy's Law, in Marcy's Law, we made it very clear that victims have a right to be heard at every critical stage of a proceeding, and certainly this is a critical stage of a proceeding, and we believe this is a violation of Article 1, Section 28 of the California Constitution, which is where Marcy's Law is lodged. You asked me another question? Oh, about going statewide? Yeah. So what we're planning to do is meet in every single major market where there are people like yourselves that and organize the victims and let the victims in every single area of this state where they have policymakers elected by the people tell their stories. We're starting in the Capitol today because it's meaningful and fitting. The Capitol is here, obviously, and that's where we make law. And the Supreme Court is right across the street from the Capitol, and that's where the Supreme Court makes law. So this is the center of where law is made. And the message today is, Governor, just do something very simple. Just follow the law.
Could there be anything, you mentioned the clemency process requires review, and I think it's if you have more on it?
Two prior felonies.
Two prior felonies, yeah. So he, specifically said he's doing a reprieve. Is there any type of, or are there any discussions about maybe some type of legislation or anything that could put a similar review process on reprieves?
I don't know if anybody in particular wants to comment on that. Pat, do you have an opinion about that? As we know, what's circulating in the legislature right now is not legislation to stop the governor's action. It's actually legislation to put the death penalty back on the ballot again. So I don't see our legislature, let me start that again. I don't see our legislators actually working in a direction of trying to consider what the governor did and fix it or reverse it. I see actually an effort to verify and basically confirm what the governor's done, which is why we've announced this statewide tour today for crime victims of homicide, is that we have to educate the legislators of what's happened. They need to understand the facts of this case and the facts of these cases that happen in their jurisdictions. You've been so patient with your time today, and we really, really appreciate it. This is not your normal press event where we can crank something out in 20 or 30 minutes. This is almost an hour, which is unheard of. But the reason it's so important is because the facts of these cases is what makes it real. What I think one of the prosecutors said, and it's so true, is by the governor just making a blanket order, he's made it easy on himself because he hasn't had to deal with the gravity of the specific cases. We heard a mom say, "Meet with me, I dare you." Well, we want the governor to meet with all the victims. He needs to hear these cases. He needs to understand them. I will tell you, because I'm a father as well, I'm a lawmaker, or I was a lawmaker up here as well. I will submit to you that if the governor actually met with the victims and had to hear these cases on an individual basis, I don't believe he would be able to go along with the decision he's made. I think he would be extremely torn. And I think there's plenty of example of people with like mind as Governor Newsom that they would follow the law. So I think he needs to really concentrate on the really difficult analysis, which is he needs to go through these clemency hearings, as Mr. Hestrin said, and meet with the victims yesterday.
Was there any hesitation to continue with the death penalty for just D'Angelo? And for prosecutors, do you see yourself continuing to pursue the death penalty in future cases with the hopes that this will either be overturned by another governor or by the current governor?
So with respect to D'Angelo, I can tell you that the prosecutors met. We've met multiple times. We met again yesterday. We went through a very comprehensive and deliberative process with respect to weighing the factors in aggravation and mitigation, and we voted unanimously to pursue the death penalty. With respect to anything other than that at this time, we're not at liberty to comment because it's a pending case, and obviously we're trying our case in a court of law and not in the media. You asked one other question.
Forward for future cases, would you still, in the minds, would you still try and pursue the death penalty if the case merits, knowing that the moratorium is in place, thinking that down the line it could be overturned?
Okay, I appreciate that. I obviously don't speak for anybody else but myself. I've been the district attorney for about 100 days in Orange County. I was a prosecutor for most of my career. Yesterday was my first official act as an elected district attorney to make a decision about whether my office would pursue death. It's a very, very heavy and weighty decision. Every decision, irrespective of the gruesomeness of the facts, it's a very, very important decision about whether or not any of us as electeds would seek the death of a human being by government sanction, essentially. Unlike most people, anybody in this room, I'm not sure, but I was in the death chamber in 2006. I personally watched Clarence Ray Allen die. Clarence Ray Allen organized a robbery, and there was a trial, and he wasn't at the scene, but he was convicted of conspiracy. He went to Folsom State Prison, and while he was in Folsom State Prison, the case got overturned on appeal. As a result of that case, the trial was deemed to have to be started, to do the entire trial again. So Clarence Ray Allen arranged from inside Folsom Prison for the execution of the individuals who testified at that trial, and those witnesses were executed, making it obviously difficult to retry the case. Clarence Ray Allen absolutely deserved the death penalty for arranging for the killing and murder of the witnesses and victims. So I will just tell you this, I will absolutely move forward on every case going forward to pursue the death penalty, if I believe that that's the right thing to do. Number two, the governor has backed off from his position originally, or maybe he hasn't, but at least I'm interpreting that he has, because 2 weeks ago he indicated that he was going to ask the Attorney General, Mr. Becerra, to order all of us as individual electeds not to pursue the death penalty, because there's a theory, or it's actual, that the Attorney General has supervision over elected district attorneys. Yesterday, as a result of the Golden State Killer decision, the governor's office issued a decision. And they actually indicated on the record in their statement that prosecutors do have the right to seek the death penalty as individual elected officials, which is 180-degree different from his original position 2 weeks ago when he was going to request Mr. Becerra to order us not to pursue the death penalty. So I would tell you this, I'm not going to stop doing my job. The death penalty is the law of the land in the state of California, period. And we're going to continue to do our job, and we're going to continue to seek justice, and we're going to continue to do it when we have the right set of facts. But I am not going to be pushed around by a governor who's not following the law. And so that's why we're going to take it to the people, and we're going to try to convince the people of the state of California that these good people's stories need to be told over and over again. All right? Thank you very much for your time. Did you have one last question?
Sorry, just to clarify, you are stopping by the governor's office, but not necessarily seeing him face to face.
I have a meeting with one of his staff members, which I really appreciate, and I'm planning to deliver a very strongly worded letter just signed by me, and including a copy of the video from Monday's Crime Victims March, which featured Mr. Harrington and the Hares. And I'm asking the governor to watch that video and to look in the eyes on that video of their stories that you heard today, because we have to make this real. I don't think it's real for the governor right now. I think it's academic. And yes, I'm going to deliver that. I have a meeting, and I plan to make these same arguments to the governor's staff. All right, thank you very much for coming. If you have any individual interviews, some of these people will be available for you, okay? I know this is very hard.
Yeah, it is, but this is where we need to be.
I know. It's just, to ask you to do this is mind-boggling to me.
Yeah. Well, I've told everybody that I'll go out and get the signatures for impeachment hearing.
Yeah, well, you know how difficult that is.
I know, but.
I'm so sorry.
Oh, no, I'm down. Thank you.
Yeah. Electronic form yourself?